never about what we do. It's about why we do it, and so it's totally awesome to have lots of money. It's totally awesome to have a big fancy, Lambo or whatever kind of car you want to get. It's just, why did you get the Lambo? Did you get the Lambo because you genuinely love just like the contours and the shape and the engine, and you're just really into it? Like, this is like, it stirs you up for some reason for you. Or are you doing this to prove to your dad or to some, girls that you haven't met yet, but you're attracting someone that's going to be attracted to you for your car, which is going to perpetuate that same broken story for yourself.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to another mind and heart opening conversation on Just Tap In. Aaron Alexander is one of the foremost experts on how to utilize the body to improve all aspects of your life. As a pioneering manual therapist and movement coach, he has worked with some of the world's greatest professional athletes, celebrities, performers, and everyone in between to relieve pain while creating greater strength, flexibility, and ease in their minds and bodies. He is the host of the Align podcast, which has been rated the #1 nutrition show on iTunes, and he's the author of the Align Method: 5 Movement Principles for a Stronger Body, Sharper Mind, and Stress-Proof Life. Aaron has received support from some of the world's greatest minds in health and wellness, such as Laird Hamilton and Dr. Andrew Huberman, while putting together his principles on living an optimized life. In today's show, we understand how the mind, body, and spirit work together and dive into concepts such as the ego, why do humans work out, what happens when we make subtle changes in our environment, simple health hacks to eliminate disease, habit building, and so much more. Before we get into it, I'd love to invite you to be a part of this community and support the show, and the #1 thing that you could do is to subscribe to this channel and like this video so that it gets shown to more wisdom seekers like you. So now, without further ado, we bring you a masterclass on aligning yourself with your highest version with Aaron Alexander. All right, Aaron Alexander, welcome to the podcast. How are you, brother?
I'm well. Thanks for having me. Thanks for taking me through that little gratitude breath practice to start. That was really beautiful. I appreciate it.
Yeah, one of the things, and also one of our past guests on the show, Gary Zukav, he wrote this amazing book called Seed of the Soul. And he says that everything starts with an intention. Even if you're not, consciously aware of it, there's always an intention through your actions. And I felt like, going into an interview, going into a podcast, it's super key to just express what's the intention going in. So 2 human beings can have an interaction where, it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm trying to get something out of you, or, there's an equal energetic exchange between the 2 parties. And I feel like that's a great way to start.
Yeah. And it's interesting that gratitude specifically, which is something that I think we all can work on, especially if you come from such a privileged place, which I don't like using words like privilege because that word kind of got hijacked recently. But our minds are essentially these habituated circuits. We go through what we practice, and we have specific circuits in the brain that potentiate gratitude or potentiate resentment, or, we're literally ingraining those neurological / I think hormonal, cellular, conscious pathways. And it's such a beautiful thing just to have a moment to start to observe, just really observe anything. I think if you really take a moment of observation, like truly, as opposed to allowing yourself to be kind of hijacked by whatever the static is that it's around. Not that the static or the noise or the advertisements or any of that is bad or good. It's just, it's a lot. It takes you out of that present moment.
Yeah.
Which present moment is another word that I kind of stay away from, because again, there's just a lot of barnacles attached to it. But if you really come into attention to what the hell is going on, in, this moment. It could be like the weight of your body on the ground. It could be noticing, I have some smoke here. I have a candle here, noticing the temperature of the room, noticing any air, noticing any little sounds, noticing the facial expressions of the person that I'm communicating with, noticing my heartbeat. It really doesn't matter. Just start to notice. And that, I think, acts almost as like, it's like a way to like pierce the veil in a way. And I think if you're really in a place of observation, it typically feels pretty good, and it might not feel really good right away because you might be observing pain, and that's something that, are you familiar with Vipassana meditation? Have you been through any of that?
Yeah, that's something I wanted to dive into with you, because I know Vipassana is a practice that really led you back into this awareness, mind-body awareness.
Yeah. I mean, I did a 10-day Vipassana retreat. So it wasn't like, anybody can do anything for 10 days, so it's not like you do a Vipassana or you eat, a handful of mushrooms. Although I guess if your Paul Stamets eating a handful of mushrooms, that like cured him of having a lifelong stutter.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So I think there is such a thing as having some like miraculous moments where really everything does change. But I think I also try to stay away from kind of like hanging my hat on any kind of like spiritual ego type, I did this, so now all of a sudden I just must by default be, some higher conscious, higher vibration, whatever bullshit being.
Yeah.
But in doing the Vipassana thing, where you just essentially, you wake up every day at, I don't remember what time, 5 or 5:30 or 6 or something like that. They have this old Asian man happened to be the guy, which is just so appropriate. I just got lucky that it was an old Asian guy that was coming around and like ringing a bell. It had to be. I got lucky on my retreat. As they ring a bell, wake you up, and then you essentially just like meditate every hour, pretty much on the hour throughout the day. And then you go to bed, and you don't have any notebook or pen or obviously cell phone, or really anything. But one of the things that's very common, obviously, in that scenario, if you're going to just be sitting in place for an hour and not moving, I mean, everybody cheats, you're like moving, you open your eyes every now and again, you kind of look around, you're looking at the girls across the room, you're having all sorts of
I'm going to hit them up right after this.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's where your mind just wanders, to just like sex was like a big one for me. Sex, pain, what else? I think it's mostly just a bunch of sex and pain for me, really, throughout the whole situation. Yeah. Sex, pain, maybe food, being hungry. All like the carnal stuff was pretty much just like the reiterated thoughts. But the pain part, roundabout way of getting back to the pain part, in sitting with pain, so your back hurts, your hip hurts, or something of the sort. Something that was suggested to me that I found to be interesting was to go into that sensation of what you're deeming to, you're labeling it as pain. Pain's also a subjective experience. You could experience your pain may be my pleasure and vice versa, and your pleasure may be my pain.
Yeah, it's like and
your neutrality may be my,
Yeah,
exactly. It's all through the filter. And so, but what someone else taught me there that I thought was pretty cool, and I implemented in my own experience, was going through and really examining that pain. So say it was something, you're having a pain in your hip, which happened to me, and going through and not judging the pain, all things that people, if they've listened to any kind of like meditative yoga, whatever thing they've heard on repeat, but not judging the pain. And all those things are also legit. That's why they're said over and over again. Yeah. No attachment to it's like bad or good, just kind of like being with like, okay, here is this sensation, and going in and kind of almost like pulling back the layers of it and going down to the smallest granule of kind of like visualizing the smallest granule of what is that pain truly, and it's just like going layer deeper, layer deeper, layer deeper, layer deeper, kind of like a Russian doll set kind of thing. And what I found with that and doing that was oftentimes, sometimes I didn't make it through because I think I'm pretty I can be like mentally weak, and just get distracted and do something else. But the times that I did keep on keeping on with it, the pain would like just completely like to transform. Yeah. And not necessarily disappear, but transform into something else, or become warmth, or become cold, or move up my spine and, arrive in my shoulder. It was very interesting. So that was a fascinating moment of kind of experiencing like what really is pain exactly, because it's certainly subjective.
Yeah. So. And talking about that pain, I mean, most of it that we associate with that word is physical, but there's a lot of emotional pain that we go through, especially since we're children. And that's one of the things I wanted to dive into with you, because, especially for young men, as we're growing up, as we're just going through puberty, and then we come out and we realize like, oh, we can build muscle. Oh, like we want to be bigger. And a lot of these things, and I know this happened to you, and I want to just explore that story because I resonate a lot with it. And it's, we usually take on these personas to really hide our insecurities and layers that we have deep within. And that can come through as, for example, you and me, like as soon as I got into college, I felt a little bit smaller than everyone else. And I just, I was just going at the gym every day, lifting way more than I should have, having, back pain, injury. And I know, in your story, I want to really uncover where these patterns of trying to kind of layer our, ego so that we hide something within us, where does that really come from?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think, and I still have this. I still, with some level of regularity, feel maybe insecure, which would come from a place. I'd be like some comparison type game that I'll play, or sensation of feeling like, oh, like I don't belong here. Feel kind of like this inexplicable sensation of separation. Like not really being a part, and I think that's something that, and oftentimes I feel quite good. I feel quite like loved and connected and like, wow, like everything is good. And I could just die. Like, wow, like I could just die right now. Like, this is great. I don't want to, because there's other stuff that I want to do. I don't really feel complete, but that oscillates. And I think I'm suspicious of people that kind of take on this like spiritual transcendent type vibe. I'm like, I don't know.
Like spiritual ego that actually separates you more than connects you with other people.
Yeah, and even ego, like the word ego, like I think that's another word that's kind of been dragged around in the dirt for a while. Ego is great. Like ego is a really important, meaningful aspect of self. It's just, are you dominated by who you think you are? Do you think you are whatever you're an accountant, and you're Michael Levy, 37 years old,
wears a suit every day,
in the closet, but goes to suit, hetero norm, does like freaky parties on Thursdays, but don't tell anybody about, especially my girlfriend, or whatever your story is, whoever you think you are. That was a more interesting story. You could be way more normal in quotations, but like if you're really, that is your ego, like that story of who you think you are, building up that character is the ego. That's great, man. Like you want to, if you had like a pet, you want to take care of the pet.
Yeah.
You don't want to just be like, if you have a dog, your dog's name's Ego. You don't want to be like just mean to ego, because culture, and podcasts and a couple spiritual books have told you like the ego is bad. You got to like cut it off, separate, disconnect. There's like, no, like feed the ego, water the ego, pet the ego, like shower the ego,
to it.
Come into relationship with the ego, like we're boys. And I'm aware that the ego is a part of my house. Yeah. The ego isn't the house, or the neighborhood, or the broader ecosystem. The ego is a part of the house. Yeah. And you can peel back into another layer, and you can come into a place that's, maybe it's more like this unicity type sensation, where suddenly I'm not just this separate unit, but I'm also kind of in continuation with the room around me, and the environment, if the temperature changes, then suddenly maybe I'll start to go through this kind of like, horripilation. My hairs might just start to stand up on edge and might start to almost grow out, which is like an old reflex, if you believe in evolution, of us to come out and like, create some warmth and insulation, which whether you believe in evolution or not, that still creates insulation. Or my visual scenario changes and maybe my pupils dilate, or maybe I'm under stress or panic or threat, and which would cause the pupils to dilate as well. It'll shunt blood out of my viscera into the my arms to get myself right. So it's like, what's the separation? There isn't a separation. I absolutely am continuous with the petri dish of my environment. There is no separation. If I take the air out of the room, this unit goes away. Like you're dead, you're gone. So I am the air. I'm reprocessing that. I'm putting it back out, and then that goes out into roots and the sky, and then the evaporation and rain. It's like, yeah. So if I extricate myself or any of those parts out of my, my existence, then I just go away. So, I guess I'm pretty darn continuous with that, and then you could maybe say relationship with other people, it's just, you keep on peeling layers back. I don't want to just keep on going on about all the different layers. There's a lot of different layers, eventually you might come all the way back to layers where there's just nothing at all. There's just a bunch of nothingness, and so, the ego part, I don't think is any more or less valuable than any of the other ones, although I might disagree with that. But the ego is just one of the many layers to be respected, appreciated, and to gain a healthy relationship with. Yeah.
I was hearing you with a conversation on the Aubrey Marcus podcast, and you guys were talking about how, we usually tend to separate the mind, the body, the spirit into these just like separate little cabinets. But then you guys were going into it, and it's like they're all connected in some way. And one thing I really liked about that was that you described it as, it's like this, there's different, they're all different layers of consciousness. Like our body is just a denser form of the consciousness. Our spirit might be the most like lightest etheric part of consciousness. Yeah, and like all of these, the mind, the body, and the spirit are interconnected. And, I wanted just to know when you started to realize this, and when you started to, focus on how your body was impacting your mind, was it impacting your soul, was impacting all these other parts of your life, because they're all in an integrated fashion.
Yeah. So I kind of sidetracked your question because I got all wrapped up in ego talk. So my apologies for that. But this is essentially the same. You're essentially reiterating the same question. So that's convenient. Thank you. So I'm continuous with the environment. And so I grew up in very like normal kind of, suburb. There's popular for Amish country, Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And grew up, normal-ish kid playing ice hockey, getting into trouble on occasion. And then my dad started getting into drugs when I was like 15, 16. He was probably doing stuff before that. But it ended up getting kind of like not that great. Now he's doing like really well, actually. So now he's like helping in prisons, and, he like lives in a church. He's married. He's very interesting. Lives in a church, like a refurbished church. They like bought a church and they live in it. It's pretty interesting. But me being a little boy, in this environment where it felt like, I think, pretty unstable and unsafe. He was coming home with like bullet holes in the car on occasion. That only happened one time, I think. But that's still,
so scary.
It's fucked. It's fucked up to be like a little kid and like be like, there's
not really know what's going on. Really, at such a young age.
So it's really unstable and like kind of scary. And so within that, I am continuous with my environment. So my response to that, and this is like a kind of like a dramatized version of someone, probably not that many people had that scenario, but there's much more subtle conversations happening in houses and subconscious experiences that are going on where, as a parent, you're carrying forth all sorts of different past traumas. And, it's like the things that we don't talk about oftentimes can be a lot more, maybe malicious might be too like graphic of a word. But maybe something to step down from malicious, maybe sometimes malicious, than the things that we do talk about, or the things that we know about. Like, we don't know what we don't know. And so my response to that was to like bulk up, protect the biological home, because the physical home felt kind of unsafe.
Yeah.
And that's something that people are doing all over. Like, you are protecting your biological home, you're protecting your financial home, you're protecting, maybe you're, diversifying your relationships. You don't want to commit into any one person because you don't want to be hurt by any one person, because at some point you were either
like this
specifically
shield that we put, in the physical, it just manifests as like a lot of, muscle, physique, fitness, but at the end,
sure,
it can be this sort of, barrier that we're putting out with the world so we don't get hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is great. Like, that's the thing, is it's like, that's so awesome. I'm glad that you made $1 million in your time. I'm glad that you're a jiu-jitsu brown belt, and you are a boxer, and you're like, you've organized your home in such a way, you're very like impressive, you got like a really nice car, like, I'm glad that you've really kind of like perfected this personality. Like, your dog ego has done really, like, you've done a really good job for it.
Yeah.
And then behind that, I think it's never about what we do, it's about why we do it. And so it's totally awesome to have lots of money. It's totally awesome to have a big fancy, Lambo or whatever kind of car you want to get. It's just, why did you get the Lambo? Did you get the Lambo because you genuinely love just like the contours and the shape and the engine, and you're just really into it? Like, this is like, it stirs you up for some reason for you. Or are you doing this to prove to your dad or to some, girls that you haven't met yet, but you're attracting someone that's going to be attracted to you for your car, which is going to perpetuate that same broken story for yourself. So that's the thing, is if that's the reason you're doing it, then you're building your life and your body, or your, any of your, like, these different metrics of our health, with no foundation, because now you're actually attracting parasites into your system to recapitulate this story, as opposed to starting to really observe, coming back to the observation part, saying like, why did I buy this fucking Lamborghini? Or like, why do I do bodybuilding style workouts? It doesn't make me necessarily which I like bodybuilding style workouts. Actually, I like all sorts of different stuff. But it doesn't necessarily make me more athletic. It sometimes can actually kind of disassemble my athleticism if I get too linear with my workout and too like reductionist. It doesn't make me a better hunter-gatherer like in nature, but it does kind of make you a better hunter-gatherer in modernity. So what it does for you is it's a virtue signal to other people, potential mates or potential people to like join your tribe as a person, that you have resources.
Yeah.
That's why you work out. You work out to show the world that you have resources.
From like an evolutionary, perspective, how the
absolutely
human operating system works.
Yeah. You're showing, and then it can become mutated and come into a place where it's like, well, now I'm like, I downloaded the program that more muscles equals demonstrating more resources equals higher value mates equals higher value tribe, colleagues. Yeah. And now I've almost dug a rut into that pattern. Muscles equals winning. And then you can get to a point where you kind of paint yourself in a corner. Well, now it's like, well, now you've really worn that gear out, and you didn't really do it with you didn't play the game right. You didn't treat the body in the right way. You were just really like running that gear out. And then all of a sudden you maybe start getting injuries, maybe you start having inflammation, maybe you start just feeling like you become worse at sports in general. It's like not attractive anymore.
Yeah.
Because now people can see from the outside, it's like apparent that it's like, dude, this is coming from an unhealthy place.
Yeah. And people kind of feel also what energetic signature you're putting out. You know,
yeah, they can feel that. They can feel that the whole time.
Yeah.
So it takes a second for like the visual aspect, unless you're a sensitive person, which case most people are. They're more sensitive than they think they are. But eventually it can become so much where it's like, oh my God, like what, you know, a person that has, you know, biceps that are like as big as their waist. It's like, what is going on, dude? Like, do you want to talk about something?
You want to give me some of that? Like let's exchange.
I love you. Like, you're worthy of love.
Yeah.
You know, it's cool. Like, it's totally cool. Yeah.
I wanted to like just take a step back, and one of the things you said a couple of times already is I am the continuous of my environment. And continuity of my environment.
I'm continuous with my environment. Yeah.
Yeah. And you talk a lot about that in your book, The Align Method, of how we can, you know, use our environment to kind of create this, you know, sense of identity for ourselves that we want to create, like towards the, you know, desired future self, as you want to put it. Like, and I actually realized that today in my own room, you know, just following, you know, all these biohackers and stuff like that. You know, my room at night, it's all red light and stuff like that. And I have the crystals and stuff like that. But it's really, you know, it's really important. And I wanted just to like go deep into that of how this environment really creates the person we are today, and in what aspects can we, you know, fine tune what we surround ourselves with to make significant changes.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I did a podcast with Bruce Lipton, which I think didn't you do one with Bruce Lipton too?
Yeah. Love him.
Yeah. Yeah. So we recorded that at his place in like, I don't know, a year ago or something. And one of the things that he's talked about a lot, because Bruce kind of has his tracks that he'll like repeat on various different podcasts. Yeah. I'm sure you've heard this. But talking about if you want to change a cell in a petri dish, you have, you know, you want to change the actual organism in there. You don't change the cell itself. You change the culture that it exists within. You know, and so it's like sometimes it can feel really daunting to change yourself.
Yeah.
You know, you're addicted to, you wake up every morning at 2 a.m. and you slam a pint of ice cream, you know, whatever the thing is, you just can't, you're just like rapacious urge. You know, you're a different person. You're like barely even there. You're like, it's just like the subconscious, you know, the base of the iceberg just takes over and just, you know, it's like, so changing that part can be really not easy. But what can be a lot easier is if you just start to kind of tease open the environment and kind of subtly shift things so that, okay, maybe I don't buy ice cream. It's not in the fridge. You know, it just doesn't exist. You know, so by adding those constraints to your life, which constraints is like a systems theory language talk. If we add those constraints to our life, then suddenly our organism, this cell, it shifts to the shape of the environment. So now I don't need ice cream because I don't have ice cream. You know, if maybe I put a pull-up bar in a doorway that I walk through commonly. I have one I have a closet, like a walk-in closet thing. So, and I walk into the closet, I hang on the pull-up bar. Maybe I do a couple pull-ups. Maybe I just kind of twist myself out a little bit. It's like nothing even happened. Like my cell just changes to the shape of the environment that I'm in. You know, I'm right now as we're recording this conversation, I'm sitting on the ground. You wouldn't be able to tell that I'm sitting on the ground. Like you could, because you saw me get up and squat up and down when I got up before. But had I not done that, you wouldn't have known. There'd be no that way that you would know. It looks like I'm probably on some traditional, you know, I got the whole setup here. I'm probably on a chair, got like office thing, got the light.
I still need to work on that. I'm on a chair right now.
Yeah, I mean, you can be on a chair and it's fine. Just cross your legs on the chair. or just change the shape of your lower body with regularity to help with circulation and just mobilizing and kind of supporting the replenishment of those fluids, healing fluids, hyaluronic acid and all the things that are washing the hip joints and the knees and the ankles, etc. You just want to circulate yourself. That's it. It's really not complicated. I think we make there's a lot of minutia and noise in the world of like health, like how to be healthy, biohacking, like all these really like complex kind of ideas. And it's like health seems to be this thing out on a pedestal somewhere else. And if I get the right red light and I get the right crystals by my bed and I get the right, grounding mat or, kettlebell set or whatever the thing is, then I'll be healthy. It's like, dude, health is, you're there. Yeah. Like if you have an outside area, you have access to pretty much every biohack that any person on the internet has ever talked about.
And it's all free. So it kind of like counteracts that consumeristic industry that health and wellness has become essentially.
Yeah. I mean, people that talk about health oftentimes are not that healthy. Like the healthiest people are just living. The people I don't know very many, not to like poo-poo on any industry, but I don't know many like self-proclaimed biohackers that I'm like, whoa, damn, like you're like a peak expression of human biology and you are doing some crazy shit with your body, man. Like the backflips and the sprinting and the marathons and or the martial arts or the parkour or the rock climbing or the ballet. None of those people are biohackers. Those people are just people that are immersed. I'm not saying none of those people, but it's oftentimes they're like, oh, I had no idea. I have my green juice, I have protein smoothie, but I just naturally, organically move myself through my environment in such a way that, my body gets healed and my body gets stronger throughout the day. Yeah. My friends out here picking up a thing. I'm looking out a window right now.
Nice.
And so I see there's a person grabbing something off my porch, but that would be an example. Sorry to come. This is in relation. So my environment can change. I can change my environment to change my biology. I have the computer set up in front of a window. So the reason I could see a person come up here is because I'm looking out. There's some trees here. There's some greenery. There's a river that I can't actually see the river, but it's just like maybe 130 feet away. So that I'm getting some level of natural light on my eyes. I have the windows open in my house. So I'm getting, the phytoncides and all the stuff that if you look up like Shinrin Yoku, Japanese nature bathing, i.e. just being outside, it's literally a therapeutic modality, right? Being in nature is a therapeutic modality, and so it's, if you can start to just augment your lifestyle just a little bit each day, a little thing, say, okay, cool. Today I'm going to do walking meetings. So I have I have an hour and a half of calls that I have to take today. I'm going to put them into maybe, you can put them throughout the day, you can do one block, and I'm going to do everyone. Like my rule to myself is whenever I take a call, I'm outside, I'm in the sunlight, I'm taking my sunglasses off because you want to expose your eyes to all the different spectrums of light throughout the day. Being afraid of sunglasses is a real bummer, especially if you're wearing like blue blockers during the day. Like blue light is incredibly valuable for the function of your whole entire biology. It's just a bummer once the sun goes down. So those little things, just that walk that you take each day, that could be the difference between, all sorts of diseases. I don't want to name any specific one, but just like fill in the blank disease, that walk into nature today, absolutely 100% irrefutable. Every scientific research you've ever looked at, that will be preventative to that.
I really love this quote by Dr. Joe Dispenza. He says, all disease is a lowering of frequency. And, all the things you've mentioned, like exposing ourselves to nature, exposing ourselves to light, exposing ourselves just to different movements, sound, all these are in your book. I really recommend people get into that because there's really valuable practices in there and they're all free to do. But yeah, that concept of this disease, you know, fill in the blank 19 is a lowering of frequency. How do we take our like certain steps into raising that frequency? You know, well, you've mentioned a lot already, but you know, what is one thing in your life that you immediately do when you feel like, oh, I'm getting a bit sick or I'm stressed? How do you realign yourself on a daily basis?
All of the things that I just mentioned, you know, obviously that's like everything that I mentioned there, just bullet points. One, you need to spend time on the ground each day. It's helpful with digestion of food. It's ultimately, it's really helpful with circulation and the longevity of your joints, and also the you know, short-term reward as well of, you know, being flexible, being strong, being able to take your body through full range of motion in order to ascertain or place yourself into a position of leverage. So if you're too stiff to get your body, say if you're squatting, when you squat down, if you don't have enough range of motion in your ankles in order to actually get into kind of like a deep-ish squat, then by default, you're going to have to fold over. Right. But if you have that range, and then you're putting all this stress on your spine, and the whole body goes into a stress state because you lacked that range of motion in your ankles, or maybe you had some dysfunction in your hips or whatever it may be. So just the simple thing, it sounds like most of the things that are the most valuable for us are like throwaways, you know, the things like, oh yeah, like spend time on the ground. Like, no, it's a huge deal. The number one leading reason for elderly needing assisted living is because they've fallen and they're not able to get up off of the ground. Yeah. Like, that's insane that's just, it's sitting on a plate right in front of you. You just haven't been instructed to have the eyes to see it. Yeah.
And that commercial is like ingrained in our head. I've fallen and I can't get up. Right. It also kind of like anticipates like, oh, this is where it goes. This is where you're going. Because you're getting older, you lose mobility, which you've debunked many times.
So now maybe instead of doing the things that my ancestors in quotations have done forever, and, you know, cultures in, say, like Northern Africa, Eastern Mediterranean, Southeast Asia, like any place that you go that people are tapped into kind of just more of the way that humans have lived for a long time, as opposed to like the very most recent, you know, since like royalty really, and like Egyptian times and like pharaohs and elitism, you know, since those times of cool, I sit up here and then all the peasants are down there. Meanwhile, the peasants are the ones that are actually reaping the benefits of getting sunlight. You know, if you look at, I don't know, and this would be a hard thing maybe it would be hard for me because I haven't done the research on it, but Black people are really athletic. You know, Black people's respiration system apparatus, like their noses, they have like a better intake system. Yeah. You know, like a lot of people, like white people in general, you know, we're good at like golf. You know, it's like subtracting out Tiger Woods,
baseball,
whatever race Tiger claims to be, depending upon, you know, the month or whatever. You know, it's like, okay, interesting. Like Black people are really athletic. You know, they went through this time, very recent time throughout history where we kind of were selecting for that, and they were going out and doing work. You know, and they weren't in the best of situation by any means. I guess probably depend on where they were at. But, you know, the white people, the elite, the wealthy, they're sitting inside, you know, and they're eating their sugary food and they're eating their cake and they're, you know, just they have all the energy, all the calories they could ever possibly need. Meanwhile, they're getting sick. You know, meanwhile, like if you look into Weston A. Price's work, he has his book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. He traveled around to various different cultures around the world, observing the dental health of different places. And people from the West, our teeth are jacked up we have malocclusion, which is a fancy word for saying crooked teeth. We have, our maxilla, the bone, like the upper jaw. There's a lot of compression and like collapse happening in there. If you oftentimes, cavities and various different, a ton of different issues, sleep apnea. Like we have machines connected to our faces in order to breathe while we go to sleep.
Yeah.
Like that's crazy. Like that's an insane aberration of human biology. Huh. And it's because you have access to all of the resources and all of the protection, and you could just stay inside, and then it's like, cool. That's what we're trying to do.
Now I was saying like, we don't have access to, those people that have all these resources don't put themselves through resilient situations, like extreme.
Yeah, you need challenge. You need friction.
Like that.
And friction is exactly what photons of light are. They're hitting you. And it's like, if you go outside, when you're inside the what is it called? The lumens of light. It's like, I think it's like 500 is like high with light that you're getting from inside of a house. Like I have this light on my face right now, and I got a couple lights throughout the house. Yeah. So it's about 500 lux is like the measurement of light. And a lux stands for essentially, if I remember it correctly, you can look up the specifics of it, but it's kind of like the energy that comes off of a candle, essentially. Mm-hmm. I'm not describing that exactly perfect, but it's a measurement of the concentration or power of light. Yeah. So you around 500 would be like the high end inside of a house. If you go outside, even on a really bright day, it's like 100,000 would be like high. So 500 to 100,000. If you're even going out on like a really cloudy day where there's like, there's just no sun, it's still going to be like on the low end around like 5,000. So you're getting so much more light energy just by walking out your door, right? And that is, it's a form of friction. You're getting bombarded by these photons and these waves and these frequencies. It's like electricity. It's like a storm on your skin and your eyes that your body processes. It creates all these various different, biochemical responses and hormonal responses, and it plays your symphony. Yeah.
When I look at like my generation and I start seeing, things like, gaming has become super popular, and that's amazing because, a lot of people are expressing their creative talents in new ways. But at the same time, there are things that don't necessarily support our growth, biologically too. And especially in like work environments, I know you've talked a lot about that. We're just, I had the opportunity, I was in like an internship in a cubicle. Then I realized I didn't want to go down that path, but I was just constantly, in this room, cold, blue light on my face. And I'm like, this can't be natural. Like, I don't even feel good. I don't feel like, natural.
Yeah, and we're living in again, like I'm probably pretty redundant throughout this, but we're living in a time where like the argument is that you'd rather be a poor person today than like an aristocrat, a wealthy aristocrat in like the 1600s. And I'm like, I don't think maybe in the 1600s I might agree with it because I don't know, but I think so much of it is kind of two separate threads. One, I think the story that you tell yourself about yourself that's a big deal. So your comparison to other people throughout culture, it augments the way that you produce yourself at a hormonal level. So if you place yourself into a fancy outfit that makes you feel cool, or you get into a fancy car that makes you feel kind of sexy, or you're at some team setting and your team is winning and you're all screaming for the football players or whatever the thing is, like your biology is clocking that in real time. Your testosterone increases, you change based off of the story that you're telling yourself about who you are. So that's a separate thing that I think is just interesting. The idea that I'd rather, like, today we're winning because everybody has a cell phone in their pocket that's ultimately emitting radiation to their nutsack.
Yeah. And we'll see in the future how that affects us males. I
think it's sensible. The thing that I've heard by lots of people, including I think I've like thought of this on my own and lots of people have said it. But I think that cell phone radiation will be talked about in 10 to 20 to 30 years, the way that we now talk about cigarettes. Because at one point, cigarettes were healthy. Cigarettes are good for you. It's helpful to relieve stress. It's helpful. It's like an indication of masculinity, and like smoking a cigarette was a really good thing. You have doctors on TV saying, get these cigarettes. This brand of cigarettes is the brand that I choose as a doctor. You cannot believe what you hear from the sources above. You can't distrust everything, but you cannot blindly trust. Like you need to tap into what intuitively feels true to you. And the way to do that comes back again into that observation. Truly observe, how does it feel when you are in your house for a long time, and maybe you got the memo that sunlight is bad for you. It causes skin cancer, all these things. So you don't go outside during the hours, after 10 a.m. until like 5 p.m. You just don't go outside. You're like, I just want to stay inside. I want to stay in the safe light. I want to stay sub 500 lux throughout the whole entire day, every day. Cause that's totally common throughout history. Like that's just the way that we've evolved for sure. And like, see how that feels. It might feel better to you. Like it might genuinely make you and get some blood testing and like run panels and get saliva samples and like be your own experiment. Because who the hell am I or you to suggest how someone listening should live their lives? That would be a crock of shit. Like these are suggestions. Run the experiment with yourself and see how it goes. See how it goes. How does it feel to you to spend your whole entire day sitting in a chair and then getting in your car, sitting in the same position, and then going to a gym under artificial lights, and air conditioned air, and doing a bunch of seated rows and a bunch of getting on a bike and doing a seated, and then you come back and you get in your seated car position, and then you come back and you get into your couch, and then maybe you watch some Netflix. And I have like this whole, story of like the modern human in the Align Method book. See how that feels. And then maybe run an experiment where, you start to implement like, you squat every now and again throughout the day. And you go outside, you do your meetings, you do walking calls every now and again. You set up an area in your house, or maybe even better outside. Maybe you do a picnic outside for lunch. Maybe you do a picnic with somebody that you care about. Oh my God, community, connection. Maybe you put your phones on airplane mode and switch them down so you can't even see the screen, or put them in a bag or stow them away someplace. And your only option is to do what you did for eternity, for that span of 45 minutes while you have a sandwich, ideally like sourdough or gluten-free or whatever, with your buddy. Run the experiment, see how that feels. See if doing that is meaningful enough to start to integrate that into your life. If it's not, don't do it. Go play video games, go into a dark basement, like you eat a bunch of processed food, eat a bunch of, corn syrup, slam down some like lollipops and Jolly Ranchers, just like douse yourself in aluminum and various different deodorizers and such, and perfumes. Maybe let your plastic water bottle sit out in the sun for a while to really let the phthalates and the various endocrine disruptors steep into that. Maybe spend your whole day yearning to be somebody else, staring into your cell phone, playing this ridiculous comparison game with every person that you see, while they're just putting their highlight reels up, feeling equally insecure because they're comparing themselves to somebody else. Do all of that. Like, I love that for you, just as long as it feels good for you, but you need to run the experiment.
And that goes to a concept that I really like. It's, some wisdom can only be acquired through experience. And I like this concept that you're saying about the experiments, because that's literally one of the things that, I've been doing. Is just like, oh, if I'm listening to a podcast and I resonate with something, I'll give it a try. Like I read your whole book, on the floor, which was really cool because I used to be extreme. And I'm glad that you included it in the very first chapters, because if it would have been towards the end, I would have been like,
that's funny. Like, shit.
Shit. But what would you recommend someone that finds an experiment, knows it's good for them, maybe, likes it? How do you keep consistent with the experiment to create that habit and, just do it for the long run?
Probably accountability would be a good way to engage a habit. I just released a podcast episode with James Clear. He did the Atomic Habits book. So I think, he'd be a good resource specifically into habits, but I think accountability is a really big one, so do stuff with a buddy, say, hey, we're going to do this group workout thing, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and it's going to be outside, and it's going to be, in a grassy park, or we're going to go paddleboarding, or just any kind of thing that kind of gets you into the rhythm. I think if you're doing something that feels, there's a lot of friction or barriers to compliance or entry, you're just not going to do it. Habits are so strong. Yeah. So I think that starting with something that is highly doable for you, creating lots of little victories for yourself, make your bed, like those seemingly trite little things, or maybe have a maid that comes and make your bed if you're super wealthy or whatever the thing is, but just make sure that when you come back to your place, so you see your home as being kind of like it's like a depiction of who you are. So when you walk around your house,
what's that Winston Churchill quote that you like?
Oh yeah, I put that in the book. Yeah, what does it say? First we build our houses. It's paraphrased. Winston said first you might have it handier than I do.
Yeah, it's like we shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that's such a good quote. Fucking good. Winston, man. Yeah, dude. Yeah, I think that's the difference between another thing I heard recently not that recently, in the last few years I liked, was the difference between elders and olders. I think that, we have the idea that because I'm 60, I just must know stuff. It's like, not necessarily. Like you might have 60 years of dysfunctional, deeply ingrained patterns. Yeah. And so when I find someone that I really, truly, which is subjective, obviously, but deem to be like an elder, I really like hanging out with them. And when an elder like Winston, I don't know the specifics of Winston, he might've been a terrible person in various different ways. I feel like every person that we respect, we find out has this like shadow side, which is, probably just innately a part of being a human.
Well, I think that's once you put someone on a pedestal, and then you only see the light.
It's dangerous.
You see the darkness, and you're like, shit.
Yeah. And then people were always looking to, I think ultimately this probably in many ways comes from our own insecurity. We're looking for ways to chop down taller trees. So Winston's a pretty tall tree, or Martin Luther King's a pretty tall tree, or Gandhi, or Mother Teresa, or all these different people. And then you find out like, MLK was banging somebody else or other people or whatever. It's like, he's terrible. He can't trust. It's like, he said some pretty good shit. All right.
Take what they
he was a fallible person, but did you get value from what he did? Yes or no? And it's like, I think that's like, we're so easy to throw stones, and not, realize that we all live in our own glass house. Yeah. And I think the more that you come into a place of awareness of just how fragile you really are, the more humble you become. And in that humbleness, I think, is power.
That was very powerful. I wanted, just to wrap up the podcast, we have a couple like last rapid fire questions. Before we move on to that, I wanted to ask you, where can people find you? Where can people get the book? I know you might have in January 2022 a new project coming up, if you want to talk about that.
So January 11th, we have the expanded, revised version of the book. So you'll probably be listening to this sometime around that date. So I would definitely get that. If it's before January 11th, you can pre-order it, and you'll get it by like January 11th or 12th. But the new book it's the Align method. It's just like, got the finishing touches that I got to, thankfully the publishers let me add on 2 years later.
Yeah.
So some perspectives that have changed from my end. We added a new chapter at the end, just changed like the whole packaging of it. Like it feels, Laird Hamilton has a blurb in the front saying this book's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Like it just feels very, it feels like perfect for me. I'm like, oh, like it's such a gratifying sensation to have a project that comes to a close in that way. And then in relation to the book, it should be known that it covers a lot of ground in very simplistic fashion. Yeah. And it's essentially the coalescence or integration of some of the greatest minds that I know from, doing my podcast. We had like Andrew Huberman. He was deeply involved in doing the vision chapter. Well, not deeply involved. He revised and edited and, he helped out with it. Patrick McEwen and Brian McKenzie helped out with the breathing chapter. We had, Phil White helped co-writing it, who he's worked with Kelly Starrett and Laird Hamilton. It's just like, it really is, essentially, if you're going to get one book, if you were an alien and you didn't know how to drive the human body, I absolutely would recommend getting the Align method, because it really, from my experience in writing it and putting it together, being a part of putting it together, I think it does a good job at educating a person how to be better in their bodies. Yeah. But I mean, you read it. I'd be curious your experience with it.
Yeah. Well, it's so cool because, you chose to specialize in movement, but at the same time, you run a podcast where you're constantly interviewing people from different fields, different perceptions, which also gives you an expanded worldview. And you're also have like a narrow, like expertise, view in movement. And it's really cool that like you've taken the wisdom from, studies you've learned, people you've talked to in your podcast or in other, areas of your life, and like put it into one manual. And I feel like just that manual is going to keep evolving. The more, the more you learn, the more you talk to other people, the more new studies come out. I think that's the beauty. I mean, I've never written a book. I want to at some point in my life, but I feel like that could be a process of writing a book. It's just a continuous evolution of who you are and your thoughts. Yeah.
And at some point you just have to stop writing it and say, cool, like this is done, which is it's a weird thing to do. A book feels very permanent, which is a strange thing, especially considering like in comparison to what most people are used to with publishing their thoughts or ideas. It's typically a blog or, an Instagram post or, something like that, where you can just edit it anytime or just remove it entirely. You're just like, cool, sweet, done. And so there's something interesting about,
if it's a bit too controversial, you can just like delete it.
Yeah, like, never said that, done. Conor McGregor posted a thing about his thoughts on the COVID-19 situation and the vaccines and all that stuff.
19.
The blank 19, yeah, exactly. So he posted a thing saying like, whatever he's saying, he was essentially like poo-pooing on vaccines. And he posted that, I think, for a handful of hours or something like that, and then deleted it and got like all sorts of shares and all that stuff. But that's not Conor McGregor's book, So there's something valuable about, I think, really putting your feet in the sand. I don't know if that's actually a term, but coming into saying like, this is what I'm saying, this, like, I know that my thoughts and feelings and all that will change with time, but to have almost like the courage in a way. And I think this relates to relationships as well. Like being with someone, and being like, I love you. Like I'm with you. I know there's going to be other hot chicks or hot dudes or wealthier dudes or hotter chicks or whatever the thing is, but like, I'm here. I think that there's weight in that. There's value in that. And I think the process of creating a book is kind of like that in a way. It's like, this is what I'm saying, and you can shoot your arrows, but God dang it, I'm saying this.
Well, yeah, because a book, it's like there's two different spectrums in, creative work, which is like the reactive work. You can think of it as like Twitter. And then the antithesis of that is writing a book, which is much more like reflective work,
Oh my God, yeah.
Work that you put in the time to really get your words right so people can understand what you're saying and things like that.
Yeah. It's a whole process. So I really appreciate you genuinely reading the whole book. I feel like that's rare for people to actually read a book cover to cover, which the Align Method's not necessarily even meant to be read cover to cover. It absolutely can be read cover to cover, and it does make sense if you do it cover to cover.
Yeah.
But it's really one of the primary litmus tests that I had with it was, could you open up any page, be sitting on a toilet, you have 45 seconds, open up any page, go to page 136 and be like, cool, like that improved my day. Whereas that's something for me, like one of the first books that I enjoyed reading was the Da Vinci Code when I was like, I don't know, 15 or something. Yeah. And I liked it because every chapter was like 2 to 5 pages or something. And so it made me feel really smart. So that was kind of the way that the Align Method was written, was in a way that's like, you feel you can, at least my experience, my intention with writing it, hopefully it would make you feel smart because it's so easy to digest. So that was my intention of it. Does that resonate? I'm very curious.
It resonates a lot because there's different practices that you go through the book, and each chapter is short. It's not like this packed. Like if you take a Robert Greene book, if you're about to dive into a chapter, you're in for wild ride. But I prefer little short snippets. I think that's just my generation in general, how we were raised.
I still identify as a stupid person, and so like with creating a book, I'm like I need to make this for other people that feel like I do. And so that was, and I'm just so, like, once again, I'm so grateful to be able to lean on the minds of so many brilliant experts. And also be able to integrate some of my own wacky ideas into there. So it was a good time.
I mean, that's the power of podcasting, essentially. Like what I'm seeing, and I started with the podcast in quarantine, just like I love personal development, spirituality. Let me just create something where I can talk about these things. I never in my life, did I expect to create this amazing network of great minds that I can refer to, like, my back is hurting. Who can I refer to? Oh, Aaron, like you always have people, in your life. That's the power of surrounding yourself with an environment. My life changed when I, stopped worrying so much about my Instagram unfollow ratio, things like that. And I started following just the people that I fucking admired. And seeing and letting the algorithm know, like, hey, I want to learn about this, and seeing their thoughts, their ideas, day to day, and just exploring, these ideas. And, the reason I read every single book, if I'm, going to have an interview, is because this is my university now. This is a continuation of my university. People think like, oh, you graduate, you're done learning. And it's not that way. Like, it's that growth mindset, I think.
Yeah. And every person has access to that. So I appreciate you doing the work to make it happen, man.
Appreciate it. So the final trio, these are these little rapid fire questions that I wanted to ask you in the end. The first one, and you briefly mentioned this, is, so what is your perception of the concept of alignment, and how has it changed over the past 12 months?
I think alignment would be coming into accordance or balance with all aspects of your life, and the physical body is just a really beautiful window into what's happening in your broader world. So that would be my response to that.
Love that. What is the biggest lesson that you've gotten from your body in the last 12 months?
I think that it is things that you think that are like almost like impossible to heal are possible if you have the resources, which resources come in the form of, maybe information or, something of the sort, guidance to provide your body with the information that it needs to heal.
I love that. The last final question is, what impact and wisdom would you leave to the next generation of future leaders to bring the world back into alignment?
I mean, my gut kind of like throwaway response, just go outside. But the thing that's really relevant for right now, I think, is to it's lazy to take sides, and just to kind of allow other people's, whatever echo chambers that you exist in, to just kind of allow other people to think for you. But I think it takes more work to intentionally place yourself into the shoes of the people that you disagree with. And I think that that's a really important thing for right now, because I think that the country, or maybe the world, has been instructed or manipulated or guided to really emphasize other. We're this, we're A, you're B, we're red, you're blue, we're vax, you're no vax. And that's a bunch of bullshit. And that's really, I think that's just something that's outside of my depth to talk about, but from people that I've spoken with that do know more about it. And, in my mind, it makes sense. That's like the beginning of things that you don't want to happen in a culture, like historical stories of places that you thought, oh, that could never happen here. People being at each other's throats like that and starting to perceive other people as being like subhuman. It's incredibly dangerous territory. So you being the person to really see other as yourself, and say, cool, like, you vehemently disagree with my opinion. I could see why that is for you, because if I lived your exact life, your exact circumstances, I would vehemently disagree with me. So I'm not mad at you for disagreeing with me. Like, I love you for it, and from there, it opens up the bridge for the other person to love you for vehemently disagreeing with them. And then from there, I think we have America, like that's the point. That's the experiment.
Yeah.
And when you lose that, I think you have something else.
That was powerful. Aaron, thank you so much for your time. I'm really grateful we met up over there in Erewhon, which is, for people that don't know, it's like the Whole Foods on steroids, basically. Yeah, exactly. In Venice Beach. Man, thank you so much for the time. It's really powerful when you feel like you're having a conversation and there's a flow to it. So I really appreciate you showing up for that.
Yeah, thanks for reading the book and doing the work to do that. That's very kind. So yeah, I appreciate you very much. If people want to grab the book, it's obviously called Align Method, and then host a podcast, the Align Podcast, and everything's at Align Podcast on Instagram, social media, all things. So thank you
all links in description.
Yeah, thank you for opening up time to share, man. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you.